The British Mountain Bike Championship. The world's number one.
Welcome to the 1991 Outback My Cycles Malvern Hills Classic, held once again in the picturesque surroundings of East Nordeer Park, right in the heart of England. Of course, the park is privately owned and mountain biking is not normally allowed here, so it makes the perfect location to prepare a course away from the public eye, which will surprise the riders and entertain spectators. Once again, the course designer is Kevin Earp.
This year the course is loosely based on last year's with some alterations. It still has its technical descents and its gut-busting climbs, where riders out of every class can push themselves to the limit, where spectators can see more than just a start-finish and so shout encouragement to friends and family members. The furthest part on the course is approximately a mile, so you could walk to any good vantage point during the same race, where novice riders can compare their performance on the same stretch of course as a professional.
This video will show you the highlights of this three-day festival, and your commentators are Greg Oxenham and myself, Bob Cartwright. Right, let's have a look at the course layout. The start-finish area is very similar to the 1990 course. It allows a rapid start into the sharp right-hand bend. Then the riders go across the other side of the lake to the Giro drop, which drops down into the water there, as you see. Then there's the first climb of the race, the My Cycles climb, which is a 200-metre steep climb, which will get people down into the middle ring as they jockey for position before going on to the Cannondale Ridge. Now, the Cannondale Ridge goes past the first water station, and it's about 250 metres long, flat run as you try and establish your positions on the first and possibly the second lap. Then you drop down to Osabisa Bridge before beginning the first of the three sections climbing on Commodore Climb. Well, people will remember this one because it is a long one. 150 metres of loose shale road and track before it starts the steep attacking climb on grass up 200 metres. And that'll get people down into the lower rings as they pull over the edge. And then it's another 200 metres, I'm sorry, it's got to keep going, before you get to the end of this gruelling climb, the longest climb on the race and the one that people will remember very well. Then there's a brief rest before a hairpin onto the tabletop. Now, this is a 1-in-1 4-metre climb. You've got to remember that the traction on this slope is very, very bad indeed. You've got to keep your weight forward down into the lower gears, but somehow pull the bike over the top. Then it's along and into the sheep pit, which is a very dry and awkward 30-metre gully. When you exit the pit, you have another 75-metre climb with no shade, which takes you up to the beginning of the roller coaster, which in turn leads down to Birchen Wood and Peacock Villa, the furthest part of the course. From there it's just a short journey, and there's usually a cool breeze which takes you along the Malvern Road up to the obelisk, the highest point on the course, and the second very, very welcome drink station. From here it's all downhill, and it starts to get very fast as the riders let go of the brakes, put themselves into the top cog and power down at speeds which exceed 40 miles an hour. They flash through the 200-metre tree-lined tunnelled Oaken Grove, and they're still applying power all the way. Everyone has their own technique for this. Most riders put their weight over the back wheel, flex their legs and bend their arms to take the punishment that comes off the front wheel. Now, this takes them down to the staircase, which has 3 adverse cambers on some very, very tight twists. It's a left, right, left, and the cambers go away from you. Got to be very careful not to lose your front wheel on this one, and a lot of people find they're in the wrong gear to come out of that hairpin. The ever-popular bomb hole is back by popular request, and the route to it is being kept very simple, straight down and very quick. It looks deceptively easy on video, however I can assure you each rider is trying his or her best to keep both wheels pointing in the same direction as they leave towards the Outback catch-out. Now, this is a 50-metre gully with a very steep entry and exit. It follows a natural stream bed, which is dry. Well, almost dry. At the soggy end, there's an awkward left bank which gets wet as each race progresses, and there's all sorts of techniques used to get out of that. Now it's down the juggler's drop, around the nasty left-hander to the start-finish area, where you can wave to all your friends, do some serious posing before starting another 4-mile lap.
But first, let's get you on the end of your seats and watch the dual slalom.
Thanks, Kevin. Right, just a few words about the Eto Toulé Slalom. The course designer, Richard Dale, spent 2 days laying out this course, which appears similar to those used in European skiing events. It was complete with flexi gates and a sophisticated electronic timing system used in the UK for the very first time. From the race starting ramp, riders powered off the grid in top gear to negotiate the 30 gates in each of their 2 500-metre preliminary runs. As the competition wore on and the speeds increased, things really began to hot up. The eventual winner, James Hardy, averaged 25 miles per hour as he dropped nearly 100 metres from start to finish, right down to the final straight, where, as you'll see, some of the most spectacular action took place. This was a real family occasion and the spectators were revelling in the intense competition. Riders competed in pairs against the clock, the aggregate of their 2 runs deciding who moved forward to the quarterfinals. On the grid now, Tony Ferrari and Paul Fawkes, followed right behind by Mark Gorman and Bruce Gregory. As you can see, riders leave the start ramp, negotiate 3 gates in quick succession before taking the first of the 4 man-made jumps. It became obvious early on that the red course appeared quicker and good times were being recorded on that track. Initial riders were posting times around about 1 minute in their heats. Even the women soon began to reduce this as their confidence grew on their second runs. Sophie Brooks, Jackie Fletcher and Penny Townsend put in times which left many of their male counterparts absolutely amazed. It's good to see more women competing in this type of event. You're about to see Clive Forth win his second heat and showing the technique which guaranteed him a place in the quarterfinals. Take note of how he's pushing on those pedals and the look of determination on his face. So now let's just sit back and savour some of the tremendous highlights of the day's racing.
The whole atmosphere at the Outback My Cycles Malvern Hills Classic was based around good old-fashioned fun. There seemed to be jugglers around every corner and bunny hoppers galore. Jez Avery and his mates always pull a good crowd whenever they start a freestyle showcase, which is guaranteed to break up pre-race tension. It's been said that Jez can do more things with a mountain bike than the average person can do with a Swiss Army knife. And these stunts just go to prove it. Although we do recommend that you don't try this at home without good all-round body armour. If your CV reads acrobatic, well-balanced, exhibitionist with a hands-on approach, then you too can join these guys, anytime, any place and anywhere. The Friday evening's entertainment included the Eto Bike Limbo. Contestants ranged from 12 years of age upwards, and they battled it out for a grand prize of a bottle of champagne, courtesy of Eto. As the evening draws in, the riders demonstrate their versatility, techniques and desperation to win this free drink by lowering the bar to an amazing 31 inches. The spectators, however, had to settle with buying their drinks from the other bar next door.
Any lady in the competition? Oh! Did you see that, mate? Did you see that? I didn't see it. Did anybody see that? I think she has to have another run, basically. Like that. Yeah, we all put her off the television camera light was really on there. The camera's actually shining on the back of her head now. Going for it. See the way down?
And so now the winner clears the amazing 31 inches to win his bottle of champagne, much to the disappointment of the commentator, who would have quite happily taken it home with him if an underage person had been the victor.
We're not going to see a Nigel Mansell finish here, are we? Next man. And he can keep it. And there you go, right. So thank you very much. That's a new British record, I understand, 31 inches. Saturday morning and the competition proper was about to begin. The massive concourse area had been alive from 6 a.m. with riders preparing themselves for the start of the fun class. There was to be a record entry of just over 300 competitors. Anxious smiles were exchanged by riders who were soon to be straining on the pedals to compete their 2 4-mile laps of the east-north site. David Newman, race director and owner of Outback, one of the major sponsors of the event, briefed the riders in the holding area before they moved forward to the start line. We were extremely honoured to have His Grace, the Duke of Somerset, available to give the opening address to the event and set the riders on their way.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure on this nice sunny morning so far to officially start this, the first race with our Union Jack. May you all try hard to achieve your goals, but most of all, remember to have fun. And they're off and running right now, already up front, 1,272. Mark Muddle making a clean pair of heels there for the rest of the riders. Neil McCartney right behind him. Mark Graham and Andrew Hunter right up there at the start. And all these guys streaming out as they head up from the start position, up around the big oak tree and heading down towards the zero drop and the subsequent Cannondale climb behind it. It's a fantastic field of riders right now as they stream around.
And their adrenaline's really pumping now. They've got their legs going. You hear the SPDs clipping away, and they rise up the MyCycles climb there onto the Cannondale Ridge. Now, this is where the riders have been jockeying for position and stretching themselves out. And now we're going to have Greg pick the race up from the tabletop.
Right here at the tabletop, we see the first of the riders coming into view from out of the trees. It's Richard Smith, 1134. He drops it down a cog and just heads straight up over the top. Seems almost effortless, of course, but of course this is the first lap of this event. Meanwhile, a little bit behind him, you can see the contestants coming into view. And right here, Frank King, 1124. He too seems to have no troubles at that spot as more of the riders come into view. Now, of course, this is a fun class event and these riders are out for pure enjoyment, but I'm sure that they'll be showing some of the experts who will compete tomorrow exactly how gruelling it can be. Some of the riders already, this being the first lap, are off the bikes, pushing their bikes over this tricky little bit at the top of the tabletop. This young guy looks like he's really having a tough time of it. Meanwhile, more riders coming towards us. Some of them on their bikes, some of them off their bikes, some barely on their bikes. Have a look at this. Whoops, foot's caught in the pedal and over he goes. That's David Rose. He's back on his bike again and pushes it back over the top off the tabletop area. Coming towards us now, there's a Free Counties Radio rider. Free Counties Radio are broadcasting this event to the entire Free Counties area surrounding the ground.
Over at the bomb hole, there's a small group of riders coming down from the obelisk, the leader of which is Graham Alder, who comes through showing a very serious face, but of course he's got another lap to go. And there we see orange rider Andrew Pettifer coming through, again keeping himself very serious and self-contained. Now you can see one or two riders are having a bit of a slip here, and young Matthew Churchill is cleaning his rear tyre in a very novel way. Thomas Pritchard's coming through very cautiously, but there again he is 28 years of age, so I suppose he's getting a bit old for this sort of thing now. And there's Adam Lewis and Ian Miley coming through, showing a very controlled style. Now we've got Tom Kenderdine coming through on the stars there. He's the bike behind, that's him. Yes, a lot of control as he pedals through. And then we've got Tim Riley. Now Tim Riley's going to show a little stunt for us, but don't keep your eyes on him. Keep your eyes on the guy behind, who actually introduces himself to the crowd, has a brief chat, picks up a water bottle, thanks them for their help, and he's on his way. So that's how to get through the bomb hole. So now we're going to look down at the start-finish area and see what's going on down there.
At the end of the first lap now, we've got the first two riders coming through. Up front, number 1152, Ian Johnson. He clears through quite neatly and still pedalling very hard as he heads on now up towards the big oak tree.
Well, into the second lap now, we're over at the tabletop, and there's Martin Althorpe going over the top there, and he's closely followed by the youngest rider in the race, Samuel Bennett, 8 years of age, and it's the third year he's been riding at the Malvern Hills Classic. He's on his micro Alpine stars there, getting a lot of enthusiasm from the crowd, and off he goes into the stylised shade. Now this is Chris Parker, who's going to show us that speed, momentum and muscle don't necessarily all meet in the same place, and he's decided to use the one-legged method. It's just as effective, even if it is a bit slow.
We pick up the riders now over by the bomb hole. Third rider through there, that's Stephen Alton, 1186. He goes through. And right behind him, I can see coming into view in the vivid pink top, we've got Michael Rogan. That's 1082. Around he goes. Now, right behind him in the red, check out that man. That's my fellow commentator, Bob Cartwright. Now, he's commentating and broadcasting live to all the spectators at the event. It was a first on the day and never before done in any UK event. Following Mark Gregg into the dam is Stephen Woodford. Stephen goes over the handlebars very neatly indeed and stoops to recover his bike. Unfortunately, it doesn't want to come. But nonetheless, he gets it up the hill and heads out of this rather tricky area. And right behind him, we've got Peter Maguire, who bunny hops across it and tries to get up there in one step. Good bit of work there from Peter Maguire. Tim Lane right behind him, face first, skin off his knees, but pride undamaged, he heads up the top of the hill. And another rider, a faceless rider in fact, don't know who he is, but I'm sure he is watching this right now and probably recognises himself stuck there in that bog in the catch-out. Meanwhile, Jonathan Everett's got a bit of a problem. He's lost his shoe in the mud. Anyway, he's back on the go again, and whoops, straight over he goes. The crowd is really going wild. I can hear that right now. It was a big crowd at this area, I can tell you. Many thousands over the course of the weekend.
Down at the start-finish area, we have the first few riders who will be qualifying for the Sunday's finals. That's 150 riders who will be qualifying out of the 300-odd riders riding on the Saturday morning there. They've all thoroughly earned it, thoroughly enjoyed themselves. Majority of riders have been riding for the first time, and it's been a great challenge for all. They're probably just going to refresh themselves now with a bit of that beautiful Malvern water.
Next up on the start line, the junior category. 175 riders there today. 75 are going to qualify on this three-lap event. They leave the starting grid and they head off up towards the big oak tree, and a tremendous field it is indeed. Some very young and very, very agile young riders amongst those guys. Of course, this is the field which will eventually become the experts of tomorrow. And here coming towards us, Richard Thackeray, the man in yellow, who will eventually win this race tomorrow. A tremendous rider, very, very strong. He's surrounded by Bike UK Cadra Racing Team, and there's another one in Xavier Archibald. My goodness, there's another man going through. You might have just heard that little comment. That was Justin Cornelius, and he's out of sight.
Right, 5 minutes later, we've got the start of the youth category, 175 riders, 2 laps, 75 to qualify. As you see, a bit of bunching there, a few tyres clipping places at the start area. They renegotiate their riding positions, they're back on, and they're powering away out to prove themselves today. Now, that's 8 miles they've got to do in this gruelling heat, and it's certainly getting very hot. And that's Daniel Sweet powering up to the top there, and he's pulling round. And in the pack behind him, there's Jim Perkins, who's also out to keep in the front pack. Of course, it's very important to establish an early lead in a race like this. Due to the nature of the track and the style of cycling, it's very awkward to try and overtake, particularly on the climbs. Now, this young man's Adam Moody, 13 years of age, looks a bit tired perhaps on this first lap. Come on, Adam, show us what you can do. And he's away. This just gives you an indication of what it's like down by the duck ponds before the riders start the Commodore climb.
The speeds these young youth riders are hitting right now is really fearless. They're only 12 to 15-year-olds, remember, and they're going at it hell for leather. That young guy going through there, Carl Farrell, just about makes a face plant, but the man behind him doesn't quite survive it. He goes flat over on his face, his bike up in the air, and he's really lost the air out of his lungs. He's taken some big gulps there, and some of the bystanders are giving him a little bit of a hand. Another rider nearly bites the dust just there, and coming through, Richard Tucker, 3134, a much safer pass through the bomb hole, wearing his Kona colours. He heads on down towards the catch-out. More riders coming through, showing a little bit more of the air and a little bit more of the technique that they've developed. Meanwhile, over by the catch-out, we've got some very interesting action taking place as some of the riders are developing new techniques to get through that rather muddy section of the course. Approaching us now, we've got young Simon Waters. I can see him now as approaching to my left, and here he is now trying to make it up the side of this little bank. Now, that's got very muddy over the course of the last couple of hours. A lot of riders have been through there, and he's lost a bit of traction. He's 1 foot in the mud. He's just about got up. Meanwhile, other riders are certainly not giving him the time of day as they pass him by and head off around the course again. But anyway, Simon Waters is out of the mire now, and he too mounts his bike and disappears out of view. More riders approaching. This one's young Justin Cornelius, 18 years of age. He pulls his bike through the mud, and his feet now are extraordinarily muddy. Let's see how he goes trying to get up this bit of a bank. And he's taking it quite cautiously. The other riders going past him are no doubt whispering a few words of encouragement. And here's a yellow rider going towards the hill. Great approach technique. Unfortunately, not too good on the finishing. Young rider Mike Harper is going to attempt to ride it. The crowd's behind him. Oops, he nearly makes it, but he legs his way up to the top. Now, I've got to show you, ladies and gentlemen, the next man coming towards this hill, or should I say young Mike Fletcher. Not a very old fellow. This is an absolute study in pathos. This young boy, total grit, total determination. I give you a man who's likely to be the next Prime Minister of this country. Mike Fletcher never gives up, never says die, and he struggles manfully, or should I say boyfully, to the top of this hill. Now, the crowd were right behind him at this stage. They were yelling and they were screaming. They were all waiting in wistful anticipation. Even the photographer couldn't even hold the camera steady. He was laughing so loudly. Anyway, the crowd give him a big hand. He's got the better of it now, and he's up over the top. We look forward to seeing where he finishes. I'm sure he's going to do well. Anyway, down at the finish line now, the riders are coming through, finishing off this heat in the youth and junior category. And I'm sure all these guys are going to go through till tomorrow's main event. They're heading off for a cold drink. Meanwhile, coming towards us, a man with a major rubber blowout. That's Joseph Derrip. Seems to have lost both shoes. Wonder why? And it sounds like there could be a good story around the campfire tonight with that one.
Talking of good stories, an interviewer is talking to 2 of the riders down on the finishing line.
Really good course. It was 4 miles long, which is just about the right length, and there was a few technical sections and a few very fast sections, which makes it interesting.
Okay, with you, some colleagues of yours who raced with you, Chris, was it difficult, the course?
Well, it started off very fast, and once we got up to the top of the obelisk, which is the other side of the valley, it seemed to be all downhill from then, and it was just through the crowds all the way home.
Right, moving on to the next race of the day, it's the sports category. Now, the sports category had well over 400 riders, so we had to break these down into 2 heats. The first heat is, naturally enough, 200 riders who have to complete 3 laps of the course. 100 will qualify. You can see them there all chatting to themselves and getting over the last pre-race tension nerves. Well, we're going to pick this race up a bit further around the course now and pick up the leading riders as they come into the sheep pit.
Right out front at this point in time, Mick Daly, he's 30 years of age, number 4174. He's opened up quite a decent little lead over the number 2 man, who is Glenn Turner, who's coming towards us right now. Glenn's 20 years of age, 10 years he's junior, riding 4175. Look for him towards the end of this event. And coming into sight now, in 3rd position, we had Simon Offord. Simon really went for it as well, riding his Alpine Stars bike. It's been a great day's riding all round, I can tell you, and these guys on their first lap are really giving it their #1 effort. Coming towards us, I can see at the moment 4 more riders all having a shot, and there amongst them is David Pearce, 20 years of age, 4171, off his bike, and he just pushes it through that little bit of Nadgery.
Over at the obelisk, Sean Evans, rider 4140, is coming through and enjoying a nice cold cup of water, which is providing welcome relief before he starts his quick descent down to the staircase. Another rider coming up is Justin Ansell. He's about to take on some more water as well. You can see from the cups there on the ground how welcome this cool draft was. Of course, there's lots of facilities at Eastnor Park. In fact, they were trying out a unique new parking system for bikes. I don't know if it'll catch on, but it certainly proved very popular with 1 or 2 riders.
Well, all good things must come to an end, and these guys have had the wind running through their hairs for the last couple of few minutes, and now they're coming down into the staircase area. And here's Phil Blacker approaching us right now. He's really going for it, and behind him, Jez Franklin, hands on the brakes, really squeezing hard on those brakes, the back wheel locked up. Remember, of course, technique is all very important at this stage. Lock up the front wheel and it's straight over the top. Some of these riders have already developed tremendous riding skills as the dust is flying on this dusty course here at the MyCycles event. Coming towards us in the yellow, you can see Neil Delafield. He's doing quite well, and that whole group of riders seem to be mastering this course, which has been laid out by Kevin Earp. As you get to the end, there's a nasty sting in the tail as well. A quick chicane, a left and a right, and that right is a very vicious one indeed, right down by the tree. Remembering, of course, coming down this hill, you may well have been in a mid-range gear, you wouldn't need to pedal too much, and right down there, as you go around the hairpin, many riders in previous years dropped their chain, but not that rider. He managed to get through without any hassles whatsoever. And here we are at the Outback Catch-Out, and a tremendous crowd watching riders go through. Here's one right now, Glenn Turner, tremendous exhibition of riding skills, and he's right out of there in one easy movement. Behind him, the riders streaming through in different techniques, some going around, some going up the side, some walking over the top. And nonetheless, they're all heading now down towards the finish line for the end of this first heat in the sports class. With the tail end riders through now, Dave Newman starts the second half of this event. The sports class riders, 200 leave the starting grid, 100 will qualify today. It's a tremendous sight, masses of colour as they head on now up towards the big oak tree and clearing away a nice, clean, easy lead from the riders at the front. And we're going to show you now an aspect of this race you probably haven't seen before, action from the bicycle in the field.